Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of Night Mode Radio here on Snorri Time. I am your host, Kenny Hill. Thank you so much for joining me again. I'm very excited to be back talking about gaming and internet news. I had a great week, got to do some traveling, went and saw Steven Crowder, did some farm work, getting ready for various things, and I got to celebrate my best friend's birthday with her, and that was super fun. All in all, a long week, lots of things going on, but I really enjoyed it. I like to stay a little busy, but not too busy to enjoy the things that I really love. Speaking of things I really love, if you enjoy the lo-fi hip-hop beats in today's episode, you should know that the music is brought to you by Lofi Girl. If you don't know them already, I don't know what rock you've been living under, but they are the place on YouTube to find high-quality lo-fi music, and they have been so kind as to let content creators like myself use their music, when properly credited, of course, in my videos and live streams. So do check out the link in the description or search for them here on YouTube to see and hear more. I actually found out recently that Lofi Girl had gone down, their live stream, which I believe is one of the longest running live streams on YouTube, or had been, until the live stream went down earlier this month due to some bogus copyright claims, which is just insane because I always felt like Lofi Girl was such a well-known entity here on YouTube that there was no way that the YouTube Autobots rollout would ever take a claim against Lofi Girl seriously, especially a bogus claim, which just goes to show, how great a need there is for YouTube to get that together on their end. In other news, Destiny was kind of going through the same thing, the Destiny community. A lot of bogus copyright claims going out on streamers. They did find the person who was making these bogus copyright claims and have taken legal action against them. And usually I'm like, oh man, like you don't want the big guys going after the little guys, but because it was such a huge deal within that community and people were getting really mad with Bungie over these things, and they rightfully were very confused. They're like, we're not doing anything. Like, we're not doing anything wrong. We're not putting out these strikes and these copyright claims against people. And it's really hard to, track down, apparently, who is actually making these claims. Which again, just goes to show how broken the system is. It's like, if you can't even prove that you are the rightful owner of something and you can't track down the people behind these claims, like there has to be a better system for dealing with things like that. Especially since like YouTube has been around long enough where it doesn't feel as if we should still be having these issues, right? Like a lot of these systems and processes arose when YouTube was still very new, when the internet was very new still. And it's like we never went back to figure out, like, could we be doing this better? Is there a different way that we perhaps should be doing this? But that's enough probably on that topic. I don't know enough about copyright law, trademarks, although I have been watching some very interesting essays recently, sort of exploring that with like fan games and fan projects and how trademarks and copyrights and IP infringement and all of these things kind of work. But that's not that's not enough for like me giving any real legal advice. So feel free to do your own research. But starting off for like news, the news roundup, the most exciting release of this past week, I think, was the Stray game. Because who doesn't want to play as a cat? I did try to record my first impressions of the game. And because I am still borrowing a laptop, I was unable to successfully capture the PS5, which is where I decided to purchase, obviously, because like my computer's bricked. Where else like would I suppose there are other places. I got it on the PS5. I will say here, it is a good looking game. I am like legally blind in one eye, so take that with a grain of salt. Something has to be really bad, graphically speaking, or like frame rates, other types of like graphical fidelity qualities. It has to be really bad for it to bother me. Things like pop-in, shader stuff. Like, I didn't experience any of that personally, but I was so wrapped up in being a cat. I feel like they made some very smart choices on how they dealt with the mechanics and the movement of being a cat, because like you've played games where you've been an animal before and it's like you're this floaty, like you're making these movements in midair. Like that would never be possible for a real cat, despite how like flexible and how they always land on their feet. Like there are just some things that just doesn't look right. So I feel like with Stray, some of the constraints that people have maybe criticized the game for was actually the wiser choice. And I do feel strongly about that opinion. And I definitely am trying to figure out how I can get like other members of my family to play this game because they're obsessed with cats. I think they would really enjoy this. I'm about, I believe, 2/3 of the way into the game. The first session I got about halfway, which I think speaks to how well Annapurna captured their vision and converted that into the medium. It kept me hooked, and there was always sort of a new mystery, a new angle around every corner that just kind of kept me going. And I haven't finished it yet, so it'll be interesting to see like if it finishes strong, because there's a lot going on. But as far as I can tell, a lot of people like it. This is the highest selling, I believe, best performing game that Annapurna has ever put out. And that happened within like a couple days after its release. It just shot up. It skyrocketed. It's been getting a lot of coverage from other YouTubers, other reviewers. And that's really exciting because I think people forget that Annapurna is like, they are an indie developer. They're not, they're not huge. They put out really good looking games. When I was showing this to my husband, he was like, oh, this seems like a AAA title. Just about. And it's like, they still sold it for $30. Like, I'd say for the money, like I got my $30 worth of enjoyment within the first hour of the game. Like, that's not bad. That's not bad. That's a pretty good return on investment, if you ask me. In other news, other gaming news, Nintendo has announced that they're closing the 3DS and Wii U eShops March 27th of 2023. Like, we already knew this was coming along because they were getting rid of their credit card payment system earlier this year, which they had announced last year. So currently you can only purchase games on those platforms through the use of like gift cards, which just seems clunky. I have no idea what you're going to do if you have funds remaining in that ecosystem once that ecosystem is gone. Because the beauty of a credit card is you just have the funds necessary to purchase the game, whereas with a gift card, you often have to buy in these like $50, $20 increments that don't always match up with how much you actually need to spend on a game. So unless there's some function in which you can add funds, probably via like your Nintendo account, or maybe they'll allow you to pull that out at some point. I'm not exactly sure how that's all going to play out, but I do definitely have some games on my list, and I have had that for a while, of things I would like to pick up, mostly for the legacy content. Some of them are games I've already played, and some of them are games where I am unconvinced I will ever have a chance to play them if I don't buy them now. Which is like, well, if you haven't played them up to this point, like, are you really going to get around to it? I don't know. I'd like to think I would in a spare moment. But it's something that some people, I think it's a small minority of people, but vocal and rightfully so. This brings up the discussion surrounding the idea of games preservation, how difficult it is to buy and play games on legacy consoles, legacy platforms, and whether or not developers and such have a responsibility to their player base to make sure that this content remains available for purchase or play, which kind of ties into the whole, I believe it was at Ubisoft or EA, I forget who it was, had said they were going to be pulling a ton of content from Steam, I believe surrounding Assassin's Creed, and then they had to backpedal because some people had like literally just bought these games during the summer Steam sale, like literally a few weeks ago, or within the last few days even, I think, for some of these titles. And they're like, oh no, we're not actually going to make these games unavailable. We're not actually going to delist them. And it's like, well, you kind of made it sound like that. Like you were going to just not have them be available anymore. It's a very confusing time. And I get that at some point for certain kinds of games, you can't reasonably expect a developer necessarily to put in the time and monetary effort to support those systems. But a lot of times when the community has tried to step in to do those things, to make legacy servers, or support the very small dedicated community that still exists around a game, the developers step in, they go, oh no, that's ours. You can't do that. Which they have every legal right to do. However, it'd be cool if they didn't do that. It's sort of silly. But just keep that in mind as you move forward. If you have a 3DS or Wii U, the 3DS was quite popular. The Wii U, not so much. Grab some games off the eShop before it is too late, before they are gone. But for most of you, you're probably playing your Switch. And some of you might be experiencing Switch heat overloads, because apparently that is happening. I saw a little article about Nintendo warning people not to play too much in the heat for fear of overheating their Switches, which is great. On a console you plan to take on summer vacation, when you take it to camp. I don't know, what do kids do? I don't really play mine in handheld mode as much, but that's the last thing you want, is your game system overheating. But perhaps in cooler news, I did see an article. Tesla looks to integrate Steam into their in-car entertainment system. I don't know how we expect, our switches to manage a heat wave, and then we're going to be like driving Teslas down the road and playing, I don't know, God of War Ragnarok in the back seat of our Teslas and not expect that to overheat our cars. I don't know. It seems like a dangerous combination, perhaps, but also kind of like the perfect date night. I mean, for me, like gamer girl, I guess. If someone's like, "Hey, would you like to take a drive in my Tesla?" And then we'll like park somewhere and watch the sunset and play God of War Ragnarok. I would just be like, "Will you marry me?" I'm already married, so I'm assuming I'm going to go on this date with my husband. It would be a fun time. We bring a bottle of wine. Actually, don't drink and drive. Sparkling cider, something non-alcoholic, Gatorade. I don't know. What do gamers drink these days? Monster. Actually, you know what I'm thinking about it? Like the energy drink market, is it even popular anymore? How has that done over the last few years of COVID lockdowns and quarantine and stuff? Like, I don't need energy to do anything. Like, I don't have to wear real people clothes. So why would I buy an energy drink? I don't know. Kind of also in silly news land, came out that Claire Hummel, an artist for Valve, had secretly submitted some fake game mock-ups into the Steam Next Fest. So really gamifying the new game experience, which I remember scrolling through all of these demos you could download, and there's so many. It's got to be like 500 plus game demos. And so you really kind of run the spectrum of like some really great games coming out of that event from some really awesome indie developers. And then you just have a lot of shovelware, I feel like, as well. And so it's sort of like, if I had known, I don't know if I would have been able to tell the difference between not only just a real game and a fake game, but because so many real games kind of look fake already, because they're just these crazy premises, or they're like some sort of shovelware, and it's just like, oh, I can't believe that exists. Oh, and then the whole adult games market, I was like, I will close that category. I was like, oh my goodness. It was a little intense, some of the things you saw. But if you would like to go see some of those, definitely check out Claire Hummel on Twitter. I just think it was I hope she does it again next year. I think that's a really fun and unique way to bring extra attention to such a pivotal gaming event within the community, is to sort of gamify the experience. I mean, you can there were badges and the Steam achievements and other things to earn as well. But having something where it's just you click on a game, you get in there, and there's just like a crazy flavor text, and then you like try to download the demo. Even like, who knows if somebody had actually tried to download the demo, or if they were I didn't know if they had like storefront page or demo page downloads set up for those, or if it was just like something in like the scroll, like search results page. I think it's a lot of fun though. I love stuff like that. Like, if you're familiar with PAX, the PAX XP, where you go around and you can scan your badge to unlock different pieces of a story. And so the idea is to collect all of the pieces of the story. And so there's like, I don't know, 10 to 15 maybe pieces that you need to collect. It's a lot of fun. But speaking of, so earlier I was talking about these essays that I've been watching about copyright, trademark. I really enjoy watching video game essays. As a video game essayist myself, that is probably no surprise whatsoever. But Jacob Geller, our man, released a video game essay on the Legend of Zelda series and the darkest Zelda game, and I watched the whole thing, of course. It was quite good. It was so good, in fact. And partly, I had been recently working on my own essay in a similar vein to his. His essays are so well done, so well produced, though. As compared, mine are a little bit more manic, I suppose. But it's really cool. It was really interesting to me because I think there's a phenomenon that happens when you're a creator where it's like, oh, somebody already did something similar enough, close enough to what I want to do that I feel as if I can no longer do this thing. And I guess what was interesting to me is in this moment, having something that was similar to what I am currently looking at in my own essay. I was actually really encouraged. That seems like the correct word. I was encouraged because it kind of felt like, oh, if he's talking about this, I'm on the right track. Which is sort of, I think, an interesting, because it's a creator I really respect, right? I really respect his creative style, his attention to detail, the level of research, how he pulls together different themes. And so it's like, oh, okay, so I'm kind of on the right track. Like the angle that I'm taking is unique enough to still justify my viewpoint. But it's cool to see that like other people are thinking about the same kinds of things that you're thinking about. Which reminds me of like, I think it was C.S. Lewis who was like, oh, a friend is somebody who is looking at the same things you're looking at in the world. They're thinking about the same things you're thinking about. You don't necessarily have to agree on everything, but you're looking at the world, at the same parts of the world, which is really fun. I was thinking, my best friend that I got to celebrate her birthday, she does not play video games. I'm very confused by the video game stuff. Humors me on the video game front. But there are other things in the world that we are able to both look at and discuss, and that has sort of built the foundation of our friendship. And so like, look at your friend group. I'm curious, like, when you look at your friend group, are you friends because you're doing the same things? Are you a single serving friend? Like they say in Fight Club, I feel like school friends and work friends aren't quite single serving, but they're these sort of circumstantial friends. Some of them become, I think, truly long-lasting friendships. They have the potential because of proximity and time, and you're just around each other enough. That's how a lot of attachment forms. This would be a good opportunity, by the way, as we are potentially reaching the midpoint of our program here. Take a break. Examine your needs. Do you need to get up and stretch? Have a drink? Have a snack? Check in with yourself. I never know how long exactly my little chats are going to be. I basically make a list on my phone of things I want to talk about, and I don't know how long that's going to take. And these are going to be completely unedited still because I don't have editing software on this laptop yet. So until we get a more permanent setup, this is what we're working with. Goofs and all, and stutters. Other things in gaming news that you may have missed over the last week or two. China. We all like to talk about China, right? Going through some rounds of gaming censorship and approval. Plenty of games not up to snuff. Plenty of companies not up to snuff. Tencent was not up to snuff. One of the biggest mobile gaming groups, and China was like, nah. Not here, bro. China is pretty severe about their censorship in their media, whether it's gaming, movies. And in addition to that, South Africa recently encouraged parents to restrict playtime for children to basically never be playing a game without an adult present, which I can't even fathom how that would be possible, because you have a generation of parents now, I guess, who would probably be more amenable to watching children play games. But I mean, I couldn't even get my parents to come like watch me do plays in school. I don't know how parents would be expected to police that behavior so closely. And I mean, you can make an argument like, oh, well, parents should be paying attention to like what their kids are doing. Like, yeah, obviously. But like at every single moment, like at some point you have to be able to teach your children to have some sort of like responsibility and autonomy, and like to be self-aware enough to not need you to be like floating behind them and hovering, watching their every move. Especially in something like a video game. Vet the video game. Vet the media, perhaps, which you are exposing your child to. We have tons of regulating agencies handing out ratings for games and movies, that sort of disperses the mental load from the parent to this organization. And you say, oh man, if this is a G-rated movie, that's probably okay for my kid to watch. Probably. If it's an E for everyone game, that should probably be okay. Now, a lot of these, online games or games with mature ratings, I feel like my generation, current generation of parents, they're smart enough to, be able to vet the media. I hope. Just sort of like vetting your news sources, vetting other avenues of communication and information. So I'm not exactly sure like what South Africa is trying to accomplish necessarily. That was not made clear to me through the articles that I was reading. I don't know if it was an attempt to curb violence. I always feel like that's a popular like cop-out thing, like, oh, we need to curb violence in our youth, so like you have to restrict their video game time and make sure they're not playing looter shooters, I guess, instead of oh, maybe like try to teach them social skills. Video games are an interesting phenomenon, right? You don't want to like let your kids into an online chat room, for a game to learn their social skills, because they won't, right? But then you look at things like what's happening in Myanmar, for example. You might not be familiar with the news. I am not equipped to like give the full view of what's happening there politically. But there has been political military upset, and the citizens of Myanmar are not happy about it. And there has been a Myanmar developer who put out a game where parts of the proceeds for the game are going to benefit relief efforts. It's basically guerrilla warfare, resistance, if you will, via a video game, which is just such an interesting phenomenon. I think this will probably be a case study for how a populace can express their discontent with their governments, with the politics going on, with the policies, and it's available on this global scale. And I think something like $90,000 have already been donated to relief efforts, which is just, again, you should form your own opinion on like what is happening there. But you can't deny that like the video game facet is absolutely interesting. And it is something that we should be looking at as we continue to figure out the role that video games play within our society and culture, and the psychological impacts, the economic impacts. Ignoring things like that and continuing to rely on sort of these stereotypes that are outdated is a real missed opportunity in my mind. Like, I recently found out, I can't believe I didn't know this sooner, there is an uncensored Minecraft library that someone has built on a Minecraft server that is allowing journalists, authors, different kinds of writers and content creators, if you will, to share their work in an uncensored space. If you're interested in looking this up, you absolutely should. It's an uncensored Minecraft library. So in countries where perhaps journalists and news companies are being suppressed or censored by their governments, there is at least an avenue to resist, to fight back, to get information out to a broader audience that might otherwise go completely silent. And it's just like, what can we learn from these situations? I mean, I live in the United States. I am middle class. People can talk about oppression all they want. I'm not really oppressed. Like, the most oppressed I probably ever feel is like when I eat something that disagrees with me. It's absolutely silly. So I can't really speak for true oppression. But keeping an eye on the broader strokes of what is happening in the gaming industry is really important to me. We talk about NFTs, we can talk about microtransactions, we can talk about like what the UK is/isn't doing about loot boxes being available in games, and the kinds of impacts that those systems have on the general populace. The money talks. The money talks. It is very important for the consumer to be aware of that and how that leads to policy, how that leads to concessions being made. I'm a very suspicious person by nature, I suppose. I always want to encourage people to not necessarily think what I think, but to think. Just full stop. If you think what I think, great, we can have a very interesting conversation, perhaps. If you don't agree with me, we might still be able to have a very interesting conversation. Always open to hearing other people's thoughts. If you don't have thoughts, we're not going to have much to go on there. And that's fine. You don't have to have an opinion about everything. But if you care about video games, and I hope you do if you're listening to this podcast, I hope that you're thinking about these things and how they apply not just to video games, but how that applies to the world at large. And being able to share that with people who don't necessarily understand the gaming side of things. We're still dealing with our parents' generations, the older generation. A lot of those people are still in power politically, economically. Being able to eloquently and concisely share our opinions and the facts with them is very important. Again, we don't want people relying on these like outdated stereotypes, cliches when it comes to making policy or making decisions that have a major impact on you as a gamer. And that's sort of why the internet is so great, kind of in general. There's its downsides, absolutely. I mean, I've been on Reddit. I've been on worse places. It's a cesspool, some of it. But like everything you want to learn is on the internet. If you're willing to do the work to find it. And there's sort of an art in the first place to finding information on the internet. I came across a great little Twitter thread from Chris. I cannot pronounce his last name. It starts with an H-A-L. Or yes, H-A-L. But if you just search the internet, how to search the internet, how to use Google, knowing, that you can search for different file types, that you can exclude certain words or phrases from your search results. So if you want to, search dolphins, you can do dolphins-football because you don't want to know about the Dolphins football team. You want to know about dolphins the mammal. So there is an art to finding the information you want to know about, to then vet that information. I saw an interesting claim on the internet recently. That's always the claim, right? Basically that school is not really it's not really about learning information in school. It's about learning how to get at information. It's sort of a thing that we've forgotten, that formal public education is about teaching us the habits of study, of learning, of finding and vetting information. And I think a lot of that philosophy of learning has been lost, probably with the rise of like standardized testing and things. I have a lot of friends who have kids and they're getting ready to be school age or have been school age for the last couple of years. And you start to see who's like the smart child and who's not the smart child, and like where is everybody landing. And it's really easy to get caught up in like, oh, they're not retaining the knowledge they're supposed to. And it's like, well, what's the knowledge they're supposed to be retaining? Is it really important that they can memorize a list of historical figures, or is it important for them to understand how to get that information, how to find that information, how to verify that information is correct, and build a framework of understanding? And especially because as they get older and the information the information becomes more macro. Like when you're a kid, it's a lot of memorization. It's very micro in its focus. As an adult, you have to start understanding like the macro implications of how all these systems not only function, but then interact with each other. How does history interact with economics, interact with philosophy, interact with sociology, all those things. And it's not even about necessarily having all of these facts memorized. It's about understanding how the world functions. And it's just so easy to lose sight of that. It's because as adults, right, we forget what it was like to be a kid, what it was like to not know what reality was like. And that's, like, again, why I like video games. I think there's so much potential in the gaming sphere to interact with things like education, and not educational games, because like you've played them, they're garbage. Like a lot of educational games are just absolute trash, because they're made to mimic conventional school, and like that is not the strength of a video game. The strength of a video game is that a video game moves at the same pace that the child moves at. When you can't beat level 1, you don't get to move past level 1, no matter how many times your parents call the developers. It's like, no. Like they need to master the level 1 skill before they can go on to level 2. They have to be able to beat it by themselves. Because you've probably seen that if you have kids. If you do, give me a thumbs up. I want to know how many parents we have out there. But if you complete a level for your child because you want to get them into video games, because you want to be able to play video games with them, they don't do so hot after that, right? They continue to struggle because they haven't built the foundation of skills and knowledge necessary to then flourish in the later levels, to actually succeed in those later levels. It's a very fascinating interaction. If this is something that you are as fascinated by as me, maybe I might have actually bored you all to sleep instead of soothed you to sleep by this point. But check out a book called Reality is Broken. It is so good. There's audiobooks available of it. It's by Jane McGonigal. And she talks about how we view gaming from a psychological perspective, how that can interact with the real world, and what sort of things we can implement into gamifying. I hate using the word gamifying because I think people kind of have cheapened it over time. It's like, oh, we need to gamify this experience, and like they do it in the worst way possible because they're not actually gamers. They took like the cheap bullet points from the PowerPoint presentation and like slapped them on their thing without having like a robust understanding of how to actually do it, which is a shame. And I think we're seeing that sort of same thing in like the NFT space, where people are kind of whole hog saying, no, we don't like this, because like some bad actors like taking points of what the NFT space could do, and they took like the cheapest parts and slapped it on their project and go, oh, here's an NFT, have fun. Minecraft, the Mojang, they recently came out and said, we don't have any plans right now to implement NFTs in Minecraft. And it's like, obviously, like what would you do? You don't just take a new technology or a new system and just like slap it on your product, slap it on your company, on your business, on your employees, and just be like, oh, we're doing this now. It doesn't work. Culture doesn't work that way. If you want to see cultures change either very slowly, well, not very slowly, seemingly slowly, or there has to be some sort of like huge macro catalyst that changes everything all at once. War, economic collapse, things like that. Or, some inciting incident has to happen. And that's why things like, South Africa saying, oh yeah, kids under 10 should not be playing games alone. It's like, yeah, I mean, you can say that. How do you actually encourage a change in behavior without a rule being in place? Like to create whatever change you're after, you have to be more elegant about your solutions because the problem is complex. And not all complex problems need complex solutions. But I think in this case, changing human behavior, if you think it needs, again, I don't know that it needs to be changed. It's a complex issue. I believe that is everything I wanted to talk about this week. There was probably some new news this morning even that I've missed out on. But hopefully we can cover it next week. Anything I didn't cover, you can always bring up in the chat, bring up in the comments. We can revisit it. See how these stories are relevant to our lives, how they play out over the long term. Again, I'm keeping my eye on these things like censorship, NFTs, the gaming industry, going through like a mini recession, a contraction, if you will, because it's important to me as a gamer. My friends look at me and they're just like, why does this matter? Well, in the same way that like the thing that you're passionate about matters, I guess, and can have like real world applications. Gaming doesn't just exist in a bubble. Nothing really does. Once again, if you've enjoyed this music, I have been. Wow. It's just so soothing. Be sure to check out Lofi Girl. Give them a subscribe. Links in the description. And I don't have anything extra to point you towards this week, so until next time.